Hello friend, welcome back to Netcode-Hub channel. I am Frederick, as you know already, and I'm happy to meet you today. I believe you've watched the previous videos concerning this series of e-commerce in Blazor WebAssembly with .NET 8. This is the 9th one. Have you watched the 8th video? How was it? In that video, we created an user interface whereby we specified 4 methods for interfaces: register, login, generate user, and we have get refresh token. In that, we're able to implement the first two, the registration and our login. So in this video, we're going to have a look on how to generate a token, that's a refresh token, for a user. As usual, you can do any of the following to support this channel. You can subscribe and also hit on the notification bell to receive updates as soon as a new content drops, which is related to this e-commerce or any other section as well. You can also like this video by clicking on the thumbs up icon. You can also buy me a coffee, a very important one, and a hot one as well. And you can do that from a link in the video description. Thank you in advance for selecting any of these, and I'm going to love you much if you select all. I do offer training sessions for people who are interested in .NET technologies, talking about Blazor, which has in the models of server and WebAssembly for web applications, .NET MAUI and Blazor Hybrid for mobile apps, and our .NET Web API for web services. So if you're interested in any of these, check the video description and I have a mail that you can write me through it. Okay, so quickly let's go through what we did, and let's jump to what we've done. Okay, so what you see here is an endpoint that we created in the version of 8, that is the part 8. And in that we have a registration and a login. So as soon as I log in, I'm going to have access to my token, and that's a refresh token, as you can see. So if you haven't watched this, please check that video. And now here we are not using a JWT, we are using an access token, a list of strings that we use to protect our endpoint. So you can just check the video on that. Okay, so let's close this and let's have the implementation for the two interfaces left. So let's go to Solution Explorer. Now we can close all this, or we have this user interface in here. So I'm not going to close this. Okay, we have this interface, and that's the definition for that. You see, from the previous video, we created this. We had this implementation. We had 4, and we defined 2. Now we have extra 2 left. If you don't think it is true, then check the interface from the repository iUser interface or iUser account. You can see we have 4 here, and we did this 2, so we have this extra 2. That is a get user by token, and our get refresh token. Let me tell you what the first method is going to do. Now, we have a user data spread across multiple tables. Example is the token itself, which has the user ID, the refresh token, also the access token. We have the user account, which contains the username and now the user information, such as an email and etc. We also have the user rows, which contains the user row. So we have 3 tables in here. Now, how can we link them so we can generate one method out of it, one property out of it, or one model? You want to have a model that we created in the first video, and that is a user session. When you check this DTO, it has a user session model, and it has name, email, and a row. This name here and this email is coming from the user account table, and we can get it straight from the user account table. When you check the row, it is coming from a user row table. User row table contains the user row ID and the row ID. So we have to first take in the row ID, and also look to the system row table and then grab the row name. So we're going to work on 3 tables so we can populate this user session and use it for our token or our refresh token. And also, as soon as the person registers and then try to get these claims, we can return this user session as claims, because that is what you're going to be using in our authentication state provider to set the claims to the user and display it on the screen for the person or the client to see. So quickly, let's have a look on this, the first method, and that's going to be the get user by token. This method can be found inside the repository for this user account repository in here, and that is a method in here. So first of all, we have get refresh token and then get user by token. Let's first handle this. And the return type here is the user session. So at the end of this, we must be able to populate something like name, email, and a row. So maybe be asking yourself, we have this token. Now, what the heck from this token is, where is it coming from? Now, this token is actually going to be a token from the header of a client request. If a client tries to add data, try to add product, or try to add category, or try to add item to cart, or do any stuff which is protected, then the token that has been, which will be sent to the client as a response after registration, after login, supposed to be added to the header. And on this header, when getting a resource or a data information from this endpoint, we can extract the token from the header of the client. So we extract it, we decode it, or we encode it, then we can pass on to this method to check if that token exists. If so, does the token have an expiry date, and is it expired? If yes, then we can return something. If no, we can also return something with it. So that's what we are doing. So the first method doing here is, after retrieving this token from the header and I pass on to this method, this must be an async. And now in here, we are making a search. We want to check the token from this token info. Do we have it in there? If we don't, return null. But what if in case we have this token? Then we can now have access, because since we have the token, it means we have user ID. Because this token has user ID, this token info has user ID. So if I click on this token info, you can see it has this user ID in here. So we can now call this user ID and now check to the user account table and now find the specific user which has that token. So user repository. And the next thing here is, we also want to get user information. We check from the user account table, and now in that, we are using first or default, and I can say whereby ID is equal to this result.user ID. So you want to also get it. If it is null, return null. In case user is found, what is the next thing to do? It means that we can now have access to the token. So we want to check the token. Is it less than today's date? Is the token expiry date less than today's date? If yes, return null, meaning it is empty. So token has expired. Okay, it's going to return null. In case it is not, it hasn't expired, what do you want to do? We want to grab the user row, because here we want to populate the user information so we can use it in the session, user session model. So we can do that by also getting the row. And now here we are getting the row ID. If it is null, return null. But in case it is not, then we want to also get the row name. So the first method here is going to give us the row ID. But we don't want to pass in the row ID. We want to pass in row name. So we have to get the row name from system rows. Then we can search through the system rows and now grab the row ID, which corresponds to the ID in there. And we can return. In case it is null, return null. In case it is not, then we want to return new user session, whereby we need to populate user name, then user email, and a user row. So in here, we pass in email here is equal to this get user info. That's the second method, because it's coming from the user account. And now the name also coming from the same user account. But the next one here is coming from this row name.name. It is coming from this because this contains only the row ID. And now here you can just extract the row ID, the row name using the ID in the system.rows. Okay, so at the end of the day, we are going to have something like this as a result. Okay, that is when user token has not expired. So now we have this. Let's also have a look with the second method. So at the end of the day, we can create a controller for each of them. Now take note that in here we have to encode, or we have to encode the URL that is coming in. That's the refresh token, because I'll tell you that when we get there. Okay, so let's close this. Now this get refresh token. I know this refresh token here is coming in with the payload of refresh token DTO. Now this post refresh token, if I pick this, it has only one property, and that is a refresh token. So when the token comes in, what is the first thing that we are going to do? We are going to decode the token. Here we are decoding the token. So this is a decoded token is equal to, we are basically for URL decode the token, and that's this model token here. So before you pass on to this model, it's going to be encoded. So we're going to decode it in here. Then to get a normal token, we have to use the UTF-8 and get string to decode to get a normal string as it is a database from this token. Okay, so I believe when we have that, we can also make a search through the token info and now check, do we have this token in there? And the table name is token info. So do we have this token in there? So get whereby the token info.first or default, and this must be an async. I hope you know that. And start from that, you can see we are checking, is the refresh token equal to this normal token coming in? If it is not, return now, but in case it is, then return and move on to the next one. Definitely this is not going to be null, but you know, for sake of this application, we have to do this. So in case and there's any error in that, we can have it solved. Okay, then the next thing that we're going to do here is, after getting this, after getting the refresh token, it tells you that the token is there. Okay, the person is an authenticated user who has a token in a database system. Then we can now generate a new token for that person. So we have to do that. You know, we have a mother method that we call to generate tokens, and that is known as generate tokens. So we are using this tuple whereby we are making an explicit variable to hold the output. So we have a new access token. We have this new refresh token. Okay, so this is going to be the new one, and I will call this method. So what this method going to do is going to grab, if you check this method, control period, that's this generate tokens, not this one. This is generate tokens. Where is it? It's going to be here on top here, I think so. Generate tokens, so that is this method. It will return an access token and then the refresh token. And now what does it entail? So when you open it, you can see it is calling this generate token here, passing in for access token the byte of 256 and our refresh token the byte of 64. So as soon as it runs it, you're going to have access to this access token and then the refresh token. So at the time, try to put separate method in a separate class, so we can be calling them over and over again. Okay, so after doing this, then we need to update or add the token, because you know it might be that the user has already a record in the token info, and now as soon as you have a new token, we have to update it, isn't it? So here we can call the next method to add or update the token, and as you do that, we call the same method as save to token. We provide the user ID, the new token, and now the refresh token. So when it checks this save token method, what it's going to do here is it's going to check, is the user already there, then update it. But in case it is not, then add a new record, and that's what it's going to do. And that is all. So after that, you want to return login response as a refresh token completed, and now this is your token, new access token, and that's a refresh token. So the old token has been discarded, and now we have a new one, both the access and then the refresh token. This is very simple. Let's save this. And now what you need to do here is you go back to the controller, account controller in here. And now here we have to retrieve the token from the header of the HTTP client request and now pass on to the method, that's the proprietary method that we have created. So how are we going to do it? Do you have any idea? Let's have a look with it. So inside our controller here, we first want to get this method, and that is a get user info. This is going to be the get type. So as soon as we send and the access token to the client appends it to the header and I make a request. So when the request comes in here, you want to get a token from the header. So I create a simple method to handle that. Okay, so let's have a definition for this. Now generate token or get token from the header. And you know, header contains a list of string values. So with that string values, you have to use a dictionary to handle that. But in here, we can use for each loop to handle the request.header, because it's a list that is coming in here, which has a key and the value. So it's like a dictionary form, a key and now with its value. So we are checking if the key is equal to this authorization, then take the value in here as a string, convert it to string, and now keep it and now break it. If not, we have about 14 or 15 header. It's going to loop through all the 15 while we retrieve what we want. So break it and now to move on to the next one. And now return the split, because this is going to return something like the bearer, and now we're going to have the token. Okay, so let me put it in here for you. It's going to be like this bearer. You can have bearer, then we're going to have space. Now this space is going to have a token here, so this is going to be a token. We want to grab this token string. So we want to split it using the space. So we split it with the space and then grab the last or default. So this is the last or default. This is the first or default, and this is the last. So we grab the last or default. That's going to be the token itself, and I return to the user. And that's what we are doing in here. Okay, we close this peacefully. Now let's go back to the method that gets this method called. Close this. So you see that here we get a token from the header, and this is going to return a string. We check if the string here it is empty. It means there's no header attached to the client coming in. It means that the user is unauthorized, so return unauthorized. In case the method is in there, they want to grab the token info, so you get user by token. You specify the token in here, and now this token is going to be decoded using the web encoder. Then you're going to get it from the database, and I return to us. Okay, so we are checking that if this is null, then return unauthorized, because we don't have any information about it. But in case it is not, you're going to return a user info. That is the email. You're going to have not a password. You're going to have an email. You're going to have a name. You're going to have a row, and so on. So 3 properties. And this is going to come from user session. So we can make it as user session, or we can make it as action result. Anyone is still going to work. Okay. So you're going to return a user session. If I put a cursor here, it tells you you're going to have a user session, and this comprises of the name, email, and our row. Okay. So let me just open it again. All right, so that's where we are, and I return OK with it. Now, what of in case I want to get a refresh token? If I get an authorized, that is a 401 error code, and I call in a refresh token endpoint, which I'm going to handle it. So this method will handle that for us. So we should not worry at all. So we have a simple method in here. Let me just close these gaps. Okay, so here you can see we have a refresh token, that is a route, and I'm going to return a login response, which comprises of the, you know what it takes in. So let me just click on this, and you can see it is a record class. Now this record class contains flag, message, token, and another refresh token. Okay, so in here, if the model coming in here, that's a post refresh token, which has only one property as a refresh token. In case it is null, it means empty model were posted, return unauthorized. In case it is not, then pass in the model, which is going to be encoded, and I'll get from the database, and I generate a refresh token by calling our generate tokens, passing in our 256 byte for the token access token and 64 for the refresh token. After that, return the result, and this result is going to be a login response, which is going to have access to our token, our refresh token, our message, and our flag, right? So when you receive this from the client, we can now remove the header, the old header, append the new one, and I remove the old data from the local storage, and I'll save this the new one in there. When calling the method again, try to use the new response from the refresh token section, and I get called, or you can now have authenticated with it. So this is what we want to do now. Now with this method, when we try it in the Swagger, I'm not sure it's going to work. The reason why, because there's no authorization append to the header. So we have to do that from the Blazor, but we can still run this and see what I'm talking about. So click on this. So we can navigate back to the Swagger. There's an endpoint in here. And we're going to have our 4 endpoint in here. That's the user information. Now, if I click on this, take note that I'm going to have a 401 as a response status code as an unauthorized, because there's no header specified. And also, if I go for the refresh token, I must provide in the refresh token in here. Let's copy any of the token in here and try to pass in, and I'll see if it's going to work. So let's assume this is a token that I have. Let's grab this. Now let me paste it in here, and I'll click on execute, and now let's see. So you can see we have 204 minute is undocumented and it is not found, so it is not working. This can work only when we create our Blazor application, when we try to consume this in there. So quickly, let's try to do something with this by consuming it into our Blazor WebAssembly application. So we can now close all this, and we are temporarily done with the server, so we can now hide the server like this, and we can expand the client. That's what we are going to work on. Okay, so first of all, we need to create an interface, a service interface for the user account. So let's create that in here. Now in the same services folder, right click on it, I'm going to add a new item, and this time around is going to be an interface. Take note, and it is an iUser account service. So with this, we're going to have the same two methods that we made or we copied in the server section. So we have them in here, service response and our login response for login and now for registration. So control period, we can include the namespaces, and now that is it. We have it set. It comes with the user DTO and the login DTO. The user DTO is what we're going to use for the registration, and the login DTO is what we're going to use for the login as well. So we're going to use both these two guys here in our login and our register components. So as soon as you are done with our service created as an interface, we have to implement the interface as well. So in that, we have an organized way. So we can put it inside the client service. And we defaultly, we have this iProduct service, iCategory service, and I'm going to have the next one here as iUser account service. We need to implement the interfaces. That is the two interfaces that we have. We need to implement them in here. So quickly, control period is going to help us do that fast. So let's implement it, and that is this one. So implement. Now when you check down here, let me just comment all the product because we are done with these guys long time. Now we go to get random. We are done with it. Category 2, we're not working on that now. Okay, so we're working on general method, and we have this register and our login. So yeah, I'm going to say this is going to be an authentication. Okay, so aside from this, you make sure you save it, then we can now move on. So for register method, what you need to do here is we're going to call our endpoint. So this is the endpoint that we need. So we have a post as async, we have this authentication base URL, and now this authentication base URL must be specified on top. As you know, we've been doing for the subsequent ones for the product and the category 2. We have to also do same here. So I'm going to I will go up in here, and now where we have this. So in here, let's paste in create our authentication base URI, and that is our API/account. So in here we can get it set here. This must be an async tag, so don't forget to put it as an async. I believe you're on the track as I am inside the track as well. Okay, so we have this, and we are passing here /register, that's a route. So API/account, then the register as a route in here. We generate a content string or string content first, and also we serialize an object in here. And at the end of the day, you can see results equal to, we check for response, and now check for response, this is a method. So we accept as a HTTP response message. Then if I open this up, no, I don't want to check this. So let me just close it. Okay, so if I click on this and extend this up, you can see that here we are checking if a status code is true or is within the status code. They want to return the response. We want to just return true. So here we are just checking. In case it is not, they want to return false in here. And the type that we are returning here is a service response. So you take note, it is the same thing that we return in here. So if it is a false, return result, and the result is going to come here with what? False, error occurred, try again later. So we can be using this for a general one. I always say that try to create a method which can be used over and over again. So do not repeat yourself at times. Do not do that. So you can see we have an API response equal to await. Then here we're reading content. This is a general method that we created. So this is a read content, and now we pass in the payload of response message that is from the API response, and we can now read content from this. So how do you read content? It's very simple. You see await response that content.read as string. Now if it's a list or even the model, it's going to be a string as a string async. So in order to convert this into a model, we have to convert it by deserializing this, and that's the reason why we are deserializing this in here. Service response, we pass in the API response. We've done this, I think, in the video part 2 or part 3. So please do check that for you to get the better understanding and better explanation than what I'm doing now. As for this, I'm just brushing through. Okay, so that's for the registration. Register going to happen that. Okay, so when you call this anywhere, you're going to return a service response, which is going to have a property of boolean, which is going to be true or false, and then the response message. Is it created or there's an error in it? Now let's go to the login. It's a matter of the same thing, but we see there are some methods that we cannot use. Example is this: to check response. Check response return a service response, but here we are returning a login response, so we cannot use that. It means we have to manually write it in there. So what are we going to do, or what can we do to handle the login? It is also quite simple. It is the same thing. So let me just have something in here to do that, and that is this what we want. So response equal to await HTTP client.post. So let me put this in the next line. Now within the post, you can see we are authentication URL. You can see we have it /login as a route, and now we can see we are generating string content since the post. We're serializing the same thing, and now we're passing the model. So this is the model that we're passing as a login DTO, which comprises of the username and password. Okay, so here, why are you having this? Async, isn't it? So put it there, and now it is off now. Okay, so you see from here too, we are checking the status ourselves. Here we checked it using the general method, but since we are returning this service response, login response, we have to do it ourselves. So we do it over here, and now we read the content from this. For the content reading, we can do the same because it is accepting as a response and as returning a string. Okay, so read that string, so we can return a string, and now deserialize the string in here as a model from this login response. This is a general class that we created. If you don't know this, let me just peep this in here so you can know what we created. So we created the serialized object. It's a generic class. So it's not limited to one entity or one model. You can use any model to do that. What you need to do here is specify the model as T, and now you are good to go. We did this and we've done in the video 2 or part 2 or part 3. So please do check it out over there, and the explanation will help you understand that. Okay, so that's for login, and this is working perfectly. So although we haven't tested it, but I can assure you it is working. Let's save this. The next thing to do here is to create our authentication service, and definitely we're going to create a custom authentication service. The custom is going to change. It's going to check anytime the page navigating to another page. It's going to check if what we need is what we have. Okay. By this authentication service, we want to also handle refresh token method. So we have to create it in a single file, so we can create dependency injection. We can inject it in the components such as the custom auth state, and also all other components, so we can be using to check and now recall the refresh token method anytime we have a status code of 401. And when we have the status code of 401 and the header of the HTTP client has a token, it means the token has expired. Maybe you could have 401, but this time around the header might not have a data, might not have a session known as authorization. So we need to check all these things in here. But to do that, we cannot overload the custom auth state. We want to make it simple, so we have to create a separate class so we can be using it off and on everywhere. Universal class, everywhere that you go, you're going to find it in there. So we have to create that one, and after that, we inject them, register it, and now start using this class. So let's say we go to the solution. We can just create a folder in this and I'll name it as authentication. What do you think? Maybe you can also name yours, any name that's all that you want, but I cannot edit it because I am running this. So quickly have to close this up. Have you done yours? So let's rename this to authentication. You can give it any name of your choice. But if you want to follow this, then I prefer you name it authentication, so you don't you don't mess up things. Okay, so let's have a service class created, and now the service that I'm going to create here is add a new class, and I'm going to say authentication service. So with this, we have to register this class in the program.cs file. So quickly, we have to do that before we forget it. Okay, so we have to do that quick. And I'm going to also register another class that is the iUser account service with 8 implementation class as well. So go to the client section, program.cs file, and in here maybe we can give a breakpoint. You can just give a breakpoint in here. Then let me just paste in this and in this. Yeah, so this is what we are registering. the registration user account service, and I think this must come here. We can group them like this. And this is authentication service, and this is a message direct service. We did this earlier on in the first or second video, so you can check that one out. Okay, but what you're focusing here is authentication service, and now the dependency injection for this user account service, and now this client service. You can see that all these interfaces have been implemented in one file, so we can handle them, the to and flow, very easily. Instead of I'm creating a method and I'm passing to other pages and moving up and down, no, we can do that. You can put everything in one file if only we can manage it well, and you can do that and then go away. All right, so now we have this. Let's save this. We've saved this already, and we can now go to the authentication service. And in here, what is the first thing that we can do to handle this? You know, we can introduce the C# version 12 primary constructor by injecting our HTTP client and also local storage, because you're going to be installing the key, the token, to the local storage. This means that we have to have a method that we can have access to the browser local storage, isn't it? And thanks to Crescenti, we have this Blazor.local storage, so we can install this package. So quickly, let's run into that and install this package. We go back to solution, and this time around, we are not moving to the server, rather the client section. Right click on dependencies, and here, manage NuGet packages, and we're going to search for Blazor.local storage. So I have it in here already. I'm going to click on that, and this is by Crescenti. As you can see, Crescenti. So click on this and install this package. All right, so I think it has been installed already. So we go back to the authentication service, and in here we can inject. Is it inject? Now we don't say inject, okay? We can put them in the constructor, since we are using this C# version 12 technology that is known as the primary constructor. So we inject this local storage, then we inject this HTTP client as well. Okay, so in here, in the middle here, we've injected and we've initialized it, so we can now go ahead and now move on. We have to create one method known as get user details. So remember that get user details is going to call the controller endpoint to retrieve the data or as soon as the person registers or logged in. So we can use that one as a claims in our authentication system. That's a custom auth state. Okay, so we can have a public async task, and now this task method is going to be get user details, and now this is going to return a user session. Remember that this user session here comes in with the email, the name, and now the role. Okay, so that's what we need. So let's extend, and here we have to create a method. So let's create a method to get token from the role. So first we have this get token from the local storage. So we want to access the token from the local storage. So in order to do that, what can we do? We can have a private method down here. So let me put them as here as private method. Private method means only method in this model here, the scope here, can have access to this method. So these are private. When we make them public, it means as outside the scope of this file, any other page can have access to. As soon as the page injects this into its header. So that is the access token name, the name of the key that we want to store in a local storage with. We say access token. So here we want to retrieve it, and it is a form of a string, and since it's an await, we have to set as an async, and this is the instance of the local storage service that we are using. So when you call this method, it's going to get at the value of this access token key in the local storage of a browser. Okay, now we're checking if it is null, return null. Yeah, that is it. If it is null, return null. But in case it is not, what do you want to do? Then we want to add the token that we have received from here to the header of an HTTP client. Okay, so we can just put a next method in here. So via HTTP client here, we say add header to HTTP client. Now the header here is going to be an authorization header. Then at the end of the day, we are deserializing this token here. And now this token, we want to deserialize it into a model. Now what model are you going to deserialize this into? And that is the token property. So this token property, what is the token property? Let's first have access to this header first. Then we come back to this model to create it. So anytime that we call this method add header to HTTP client, we're going to have a public variable. So let me say here is a public method. So even aside from this scope, everybody, if even you want to have access to this method, it's possible. Okay, so try to have access to the method on my computer, and it's possible. So let's see. Let's see, the public means it is for global use. So within the application, any method can have access to this. Now this is going to return an HTTP client. So here, we have injected HTTP client in here. So this instance, we are going to remove the authorization as soon as you call this. Then the default one here is we're going to add a new one. So we're going to add it as a bearer type. And now in that, we're going to deserialize this string. Because this, you're going to deserialize this. This is going to get the string from the token, isn't it? This is going to get the token, not the string from the token from the local storage. And now when you get a token, we want to convert it into, when deserializing, we want to convert it into this model, token property. Now the token property has in two properties, and that's the token and the refresh token. That is what we are storing into the local storage. So quickly, let's create this here so you understand what I am talking about. So we can create that model inside authentication because it's limited to this class, this project. So add this as token property, token prop. Now this token prop, it has in only two properties, and this is what we are going to use to store into the local storage. You don't want to store a lot of data which is not necessary, which the user doesn't need. You want to store only tokens and a refresh token. User information is not. It's going to be make a call from the API and now set it to the custom authentication state provider. So this is what we need in there. Now we're going to convert this into a JSON or into a list where we're going to have token and now the refresh token. So when you go back to this auth service, you want to convert this back to this token. So we're going to have two properties in it. And in that two properties, you want to extract, you want to get the token itself, add it to the header of an HTTP client, and I return this client to this. This is a return type. So anytime that you call this, it is returning an HTTP client, which has the header of a bearer token set in here. Good. Now let's come back here. So let's go back. So we call this now. So we're going to have an HTTP client with the header added to this. This is not a free header, rather going to be a header, token header added. Okay, so you can see aside from that, we are deserializing the string here, this token, because here it gets the token, deserializes it, and now append to the header, but it is not returning the token itself. So here we want to also return the token, so we can be using it for the other method, other operations. So we deserialize it here, the token, so we can have access to this token property, which comprises of the refresh token and now the main or the access token. We check if it is null, or if the token itself is null, then return null. Okay, we get just checking it for instance, for sake of maybe a future error. But I'm sure it's not going to be a null, but let's do that, okay? Aside from this, if it is not null, then what are you going to do next? We are going to make a call so we can retrieve a list. We can retrieve the data from the user, from the endpoint. Remember that when we created the account controller. So when you check the server, you can see that from the account controller, we created this user info. So get user info. This get user info, it is accepting what token from the header. So it takes in token from the header. As you can see from this, it has a token from the header. So now that in the application, we've also added a token to the header in here, it means you can now make a call to that API, that endpoint, isn't it? Yes. So we're going to check. We call this method to make a call. And now we're going to check if the status code here, it is in a success mode from 100 to 200 or so. Then we want to return get user, because as soon as it returns it, we're going to have this object in the string format. We want to deserialize it by calling this get user session, which is going to deserialize this into a model. Then we can now return it to the application. And this is going to happen when the header contains a token which is valid. So we need to also create this get user detail from an API. The reason why I'm separating this is we're going to be using them often. We can use them once or twice here. So it's a matter of do not repeat yourself. Take note all the time. Do not repeat yourself. Try to make it in a classes so you can be calling them one after the another. Okay. So we have this, and this is going to be a private method. So down here, let's also create a private method, which is going to get detail from the API. And you know, it is returning an HTTP response message. So we call this client, as you can see, we get an instance of this client in here. And as soon as we use this add header, it means this client here has a header. That is a bearer token. And now we call this endpoint. We do not need to specify any parameter here, because the endpoint is going to retrieve the header from the client and the HTTP request, and it's going to process it. And in case you get the header, you get the value, it's going to use that value as a parameter, search the database, and now return the list to us. So we can return this HTTP response. Now, when it comes here, we are checking that if it's in the status code, then we pass in the response, because you know this is a response that is coming in. So we have to decrypt, or we have to translate this response to a model so we can return it to the user. So we create another method. I did that because you're going to also be using it again. Okay. So let's see, get user session. So maybe we can put this get user session under the public, because maybe I'm sure we're going to be using this again somewhere else. So we have this public is a get user session. And now you can see it is coming in. The payload here is a response, because if we are passing the response here as an HTTP response message, and now we read the content, we visualize it into a user session, and I return. So as I speak, this return is going to return what? Take note. It's going to return, let's see. It's going to return a user session. As you can see from here, it's returning what? A user session. Okay. So aside from this, that is if and only the token has not expired. That is when it has the status code of 200, 201, 204, and etc. It's going to work. But in case you have 401 as unauthorized, that is when the token expires. Because you know, in an API, we are checking that the token can be expired. If the today's date or if the token expiry date is less than today's date, you should return null. And as soon as you return null, we want to return unauthorized. So in such case, when it's unauthorized, what can we do? We have to first check if the header has a token, has a session known as authorization, and based on that, the response is an 401 before we can say that the token has expired. If not, anytime in case, if any, there's even a response of 401 to any part, and this time around there's no header attached to that client, we're going to still call a refresh token, and that's not what we want. Okay, we want to make sure we do this while this happens. We do this if and only this happens. That's what you want to do. So let's save this. So down here, after I return this, so if the status code here it is not equal to success, it's going to skip this. Then we can now check. So let me put it here. The next line will help. So I'm saying that, or you and we are saying that if the HTTP client or default header request dot contains authorization. So meaning if it contains authorization, it tells you that there's an header added to it. And so this true must be true before this can run. And if the status code is unauthorized, that is only when we want to execute this method. Okay. Now what are we going to do? We are going to encode this. So here we need to install this package. So we are going to encode the token. I already explained the encoded token in the version of the part 8. To trim it, remove all // and all other things which are not needed for us to have access to an URL format. So we do that, we get a byte out of it. And also we could see we are using this web encoders.base64 URL encode. So if you remember, when we got to the account session, we decoded it. Is it here, or that is a account repository? So account repository in here, where can I find that? So is that account repository? And in here, what we did here was we decoded. You can see base64 URL decode. So we have to encode before we can decode. So we make sure that we trim it, we remove all / and all these stuff, and package it very well. But when it gets to the application whereby you're going to make a set from the database, it has to convert back to the normal one before it can make it. And that is the reason why we use a decode. So to package it very nice and now present it well, we have to encode it. And that's the reason why we are also using the encoding in the auth service. Okay, so we have to install this package. So let's do that quickly. So even if I click on this control period, it's going to tell me that install this package and make sure find and install the latest version of it. So let's wait, and it's going to install this Microsoft etc. Okay. So we have to install that, and maybe at the end of the day you have to include a namespace as well. Control period, it has been created already. So that is it. So you package it, prepare very well before you paste it. Now we see after we prepare to get a valid token, we are setting the valid token to this refresh token in here. Okay, so we set it in here as a refresh token, and that's a valid token in here. So once you have this, you're not going to make a post, because when you have a status code of 401, please send the refresh token so that you can retrieve the new one, the new refresh token, and also the new access token. So once you have this prepared, the next thing to do here is we have to send this on the endpoint so we can retrieve a new token. So we have to do that. And we can do that with this method. So down here, we can have this method done. And you can see we pass it to this API account, refresh token. That's a route. API, it is a route. Account is a controller. Refresh token is a route that we specify. So we generate a string content, but then we have to serialize this model. That is a post refresh token DTO, which contains only one property known as refresh token. That is this one. So we serialize it into a JSON. Then we now send it. After sending, we have to cache it here because there's going to be a response. So let's get to read the response. At times, the response could be 204, that is undocumented, maybe when the token is being deleted. So we want this to execute if and only the status code is okay. And now it is in the success mode. So you know, success start from I think the 20 or so, 100 up to, yeah, I'll find out and maybe later on I'll tell you that, okay? So if it is success and the status code is okay, that is when you want to perform this operation. So I think we have to close it. One is left. Okay. So Control KD, you have to format it well. So if it is working, then as you can see from here, we can now read the content as a string, decrypt it or deserialize it into a login response. So we have a new token at hand in this response. So that's the login response. And now once you have it, the next to do here is we have to update, or we have to set it to the local storage, so that anytime that we call this method add header, we can now, it goes to the token there and now grab it there and now add it. So as soon as you get it, make sure you set it to the local storage. And we can do that from a single method in here. So here we're going to add it to local storage, as you can see. So set token to local storage. Then we're going to create a method known as set token to local storage. And we know we have to serialize it because, you know, local storage handle string, not object. So we have to serialize it into JSON before we can save it there. And now this token property here contains two properties, such as the refresh token and now the token itself, the access token. So we have to serialize them in here, and that's why we have token, refresh token. We set the values here from the response coming in as the new token and now the new refresh token. Okay, so now we have this method. What can we do? We have to create this definition for this method and now set the token to the local storage. So this also is going to be a public method. So here we can also get a public method down there. And now this public method, we are setting item to local storage. As you can see, set item async, then the same name. So make sure you have the same key. You pass in the string content as token, and now we have this saved to the local storage. Okay, so that's what we are doing here. So after doing all this, what is the next thing to do? What do you think will be the next thing to do? Tell me. We can now call the API again, and now calling the API, that is this API, get account, okay? So that we can retrieve the token info, the user info, email, row, and the other one is what? Name. So name, email, and then the row from the user session. So once you are done with this, down here, we have to call this method, and that is call the API again. So get user detail from API, and then that is a method. If I peep on this, if I click on peep definition, we see it is connected to the API account, and now this. And now before that, we call this add header to HTTP client, which is going to look to the database, not the database, the local storage, fetch in the token, add it to the header, and I return an instance of this client. Then we can use that one to call this endpoint, which contains the authorization section. Okay, now if this is in the status code, then return get user session here. The same method that we created, we see we are still using it again. So we use the same method somewhere else here, and I'm using the same method in here. That's the reason why I put it in one class. So instead of making a repetition here, no, we don't do that. Do not repeat yourself at all time. Try not to. So we have to return. But in case the status code, of this, it is not success, then maybe you can return now, because you know at the end of the day, this must return now. Okay, so if it is now, it means the user data could not be retrieved, and maybe there could be an error in that. So down here, let's return now. That is, if all of this could not work, this is the default one, return now to this. And now we can now go on with what you want to do. So now with that, we have this set. Let's save this. We are going to be using some method in here. So let me just close this up. Then we need some method, and this method is going to be public method. So where we have this public, let me put them down here. That is remove token, and also set. So this is a remove token. If you want to remove token, just remove item async, passing the token name, and that is going to be removed. And now when you have this claims principal, I mean, if you want to set claims, then we are retrieving. So you pass in this user session. This user session here contains the name, the email, and the row from the API. Remember that. So we can also be used. So we're going to be using this in the custom or state. Okay. So that's what we have now. So this service is what we've created, and now it is working. Although we haven't tested it, but trust me, this is working. All right, we spent about 53 minutes now, and I believe it is okay for this part. In the next video, we are going to talk about creating this custom authentication state, creating the custom auth state, and I can create that and also use this auth service in that custom auth state for the authentication and also for calling of a reference token as well. Aside from that, we'll be using the same service in other components such as register component, login component, and other services as well. Anytime that we need to call a reference token, we can use this here. So this becomes a general class that I'm using it all over in the application. We have a look on how to do that in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and also like this video as well. You can also buy me coffee, and I'm very glad to take it. Hot one, it'd be okay for me. Thank you. And I'm going to catch you in the next video.